I don't have a present. I don't have a slideshow, so I'm just going to share here. First off, big thanks for the presenters for bringing such great, um, putting on a great program, but also bringing such great thinkers and emergent integral thinkers into our orbit. So Gebser in dialogue with a silenced paleontologist, a rogue doctor, a revolutionary mystic. Um, I really love it. So I'm hoping this will be a contribution to a language of spirit that, especially drawing on Thomas Berry and Brian Swimme's work, especially Brian's recent book, Cosmogenesis. So, four things I'd like to talk about: anamnesis, in which I'm going to be looking to remember what integral is from my position as a doctoral student in the ecology, spirituality, and religion program. Cosmogenesis, that has its inheritance from Teilhard, Berry, and Swimme. Evolutionary convergence, what all of these integral thinkers are converging on, and directions from the ever-present origin outward and back, and seeing this effect of this timeless anachronon. So anyway, so this has given me a really nice excuse to revisit some great thinkers. So in terms of my standpoint to these integral thinkers, I just wanted to share a little bit about some institutional history, which I think is important in terms of a context for a lot of some of this information. So Robert McDermott talks about ecology, spirituality, and religion, a program at CIS, as at the confluence of these two streams, philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness, and ecology and religion, on the other hand, which are converging in CIIS. So Robert compares Thomas Berry in relation to Teilhard, much the same as Haridas Chowdhury to Aurobindo, namely the foremost scholar on the elder's work. So as the story goes, Frederick Spiegelberg, who knew Jung, left Stanford to found American Academy of Asian Studies, searched for a representative of Indian philosophy and yoga, pretty immediately recognized Aurobindo to be that guy, and Chowdhury was sanctioned to teach integral yoga or share that philosophy at American Academy of Asian Studies. Eventually, AAAS, as I understand it, falters, and Chowdhury, through the Cultural Integration Fellowship, starts the California Institute of Asian Studies, dies, and Spiegelberg gets accreditation right as the California Institute of Asian Studies becomes the California Institute of Integral Studies, which comes into existence in 1980, which is sort of, this word integral becomes a compromise. On the one hand, it sort of does what the accreditation needs to in terms of changing the language, since it's now more of a place for psychology than Asian studies potentially. But also because Wilbur's work is getting traction, having integrated Gebser and Aurobindo. And so as I understand it, Rockefeller is funding Brian and Thomas's work, as well as Rick Tarnas's work separately, as well as the library, as well as the Haridas chair. And so a lot of these currents are really coming together under Robert, who's president of CIS and eventually philosophy and religion and PCC chair within the wider institute. And ESR comes into existence right in this convergence. And I bring that up because Robert and Brian, who are both influenced by Berry and Teilhard, are teaching a course on anthroposophy and cosmological powers together. And you have this really interesting esoteric synthesis of this post-materialist, post-positivistic, scientistic metaphysics, which all comes into the book on cosmogenesis. So I want to suggest cosmogenesis as the phenomenon that a lot of these integral philosophers are ultimately converging on. The American pragmatists, Charles Sanders Peirce and William James, and this idea of knowing an object based on the effect, I think moves Jung's psychological work, as well as ultimately what Teilhard is converging on paleontologically and geologically, Aurobindo spiritually, maybe Gebser culturally, and Vogelin, Eric Vogelin politically. But Berry's integral ecology, Swimme's cosmology, is all converging on this same phenomenon and effect, namely how this ever-present origin manifests. So I think Teilhard calls it amorization, Peirce calls it agapism and evolutionary love, but it's towards this intensification of loving relations as they break into reality. Brian talks about parental care, and where we are gravitating towards and what we're attracted towards. And so an anamnetic reflection is really meant to remember these cosmogenetic principles that structure experience, which is compressed into memory in these psychic layers, which are ultimately inscribed in land. And so I felt that sometimes hidden history is important, just to sort of consider the role of oil money in fueling this emergence of this integral consciousness. On the one hand, Edith Rockefeller funding the Psychology Club, in which the 7 sermons were first delivered publicly, coming out of the Red Books, given by Philemon, who's ultimately revealed to be the first Gnostic, Simon Magus. And this, again, this synthesis of Gnostic, Hermetic, esoteric, scientific synthesis that bridges alchemy and psychoanalysis, and factors into integral consciousness as an important philosophical current. And similarly, that an integral community in CIIS also fueled by similar dynamics that are converging in this esoteric synthesis. So with that said, I want to, thinking of oil as fueling, or money as fueling this proliferation of wisdom on the one hand, but also the commodification of wisdom, I think also is important to consider in terms of the superior insight of nature and this healing power of nature that will ultimately come in through dreams for Jung, and the cosmogenetic principles that I suggest dreams represent, those fundamental natural forces. So let me just see, and can get into this dream logic that is extending across the sleep-waking spectrum, and really kind of offering energy pathways into the future that are based on this presence of natural inclinations. So speaking a little generally, but hopefully that will be clear a little bit more. So to move to cosmogenesis, and looking at looking at integral philosophy as a cultural philosophy, able to understand cosmogenesis, I want to just introduce a few important cosmologists who I think contribute to this understanding. Teilhard, Brian Swimme, Adrian Bejan, Eric Chasen, Irvin Laszlo, Geoffrey West, and Wolfgang Pauli, who help to develop a science of symbols that are able to convey these cosmogenetic principles. And I think the Red Book was considered or called the universe constellating through Jung in this Red Book. So Adrian Bejan states that big history is what he calls the constructal law writ large, this tendency for energy to move through mass over time as efficiently as possible with these emerging fractal branching patterns, self-similar across scale in blood vessels, in rivers, in trees, as really this universal energy flow pattern that also might come into language. Eric Chasen talks about how as pockets of creativity converge, you have these thresholds of increasing complexity that are reached, leading to emergent structures whose properties allow for these greater rates of energy flow, so that you have higher levels of complexity. And I bring that up just because Teilhard's law of complexity consciousness suggests this positive relationship between greater complexity and greater consciousness as well. And Teilhard speaks about this Christian phylum, where this self-awareness of love in action incarnates and scales up in human history, where this energy rate density, by other words, might show itself to be most sustainable, and the role of compassion, the role of equity, the role of selflessness in maintaining sustainable energy use, as well as perpetuating culture. So Wolfgang Pauli, suggests a psychology of science requires an analysis of dreams in order to see the impact of the unconscious on scientific theory. And so really looking, this is also where Thomas Kuhn talks about the role of the psychology of industrial networks in which science is conducted in order to know reality. And so his work with dreams and psychophysics leads him to biology as a sort of synthesis of psychology and physics. And I'd offer ecology as a good fit too. And so bringing these cosmogenetic principles, right, that are invisible, that are largely, again, unconscious, and yet that structure the way energy flows through time, I want to suggest dreams as a place for that to happen, where experience is remembered and acted on, and that dream work can offer a self-awareness of these epochal experiences that structure our experience and unconsciously direct our daily lives. So the wisdom of this, of nature, right, as it's engaged in its thermodynamic flow, that wisdom is breaking through in our symbolic consciousness that helps us to become self-aware of these cosmogenetic principles, so that by performing a cultural history or cultural philosophy, we're able to see this expressed in all of these components in order to intensify that self-consciousness of natural patterns and patterning of energy. So how this converges with all of these different integral thinkers I want to go back to, well, I want to go back to pragmatism, American pragmatism. And I believe in 1912, right before Jung is really getting into his Red Book and Black Book experiences, he's reading William James's Pragmatism, and this idea that we can know an object by its effect. And so, how does schizophrenia affect a doctor and a patient? How do these hallucinations resemble these mystery religions? That work ultimately becomes the basis of his theory of collective unconscious. So for instance, word association tests triggering this unconscious, this invisible structure that creates a measurable disturbance as the effect of this image is called to mind, indicating these emotionally charged memories. And so like how far back in time does that go and how widespread is that effect? This becomes this question that Jung dives into. On the one hand, this origin and evolution of spirituality and spiritual experience, but around which we find societies will self-organize themselves. So Jung examines this in his questions and inquiry into the study of Miss Miller and the cultural mythologies, tracing the psychic energy through and to her personal and the wider culture's roots, before tracing his own roots through the Black and Red books, seeing these same core motifs that, again, I'd argue are based on these cosmogenetic principles. And as a medical physician who is using dreams for healing, he's recognizing individuation and centroversion as this natural process that is naturally uniting these opposites that he sees in this anamnetic recalling of this unconscious spirit within nature, and the logic of the dream, etc. So I will move on. I think I'm going to end by talking about directions that this convergence engages in, or all of these integral thinkers are converging on with regards to these cosmogenetic principles that are emerging as energy flows, psychologically, physically, spiritually, culturally, politically, etc. Gebser talks about a perspectival consciousness as the effect of this emerging integral structure. And so my suggestion is that this ever-present origin, understanding it and becoming self-conscious of it, is helped with an understanding of cosmogenesis and this integral cultural philosophy, which is able to see these patterns and emerging tendencies, although there's this necessary distantiation or distance for that integration to occur. So a few directions that seem to me to be worth considering are, on the one hand, lucid dreaming, as well as sleep and dream yoga, where the phenomenology of experience of these cosmogenetic principles and the way energy flows, we bring consciousness to that otherwise unconscious dream state in order to, you could say, bridge the duality or unite the opposites, but engage in another deepening experience of reality. And hypnagogic and hypopompic states, when you're coming into or out of sleep, that is where there have been so many examples of problems being solved, and energy blockages and bottlenecks really prompting new energy pathways to emerge, that is guided by this imagery and dream logic that is able to freely flow into new pathways. Similarly, dream exchange, sharing dreams with one another. I think that is also where you have this concretization of an integral consciousness that is becoming self-aware of and deepening and intensifying into the underlying structures of life, and yeah, bringing the past and future into the present in an intensified consciousness as we talk with one another about things that are meaningful. Third, this idea of, Vogelin talks about immanentizing the eschaton, but, Gebser talks about the role of integral consciousness in daily life. And so entering into it with a balanced consciousness that is able to embrace this deep understanding of what is most basic to our experience, and in doing so, entering into the pathway or process of what it means to live a divine life. Teilhard talks about the amorization of the universe that is really able to enter through that love as it is expressed through us. Although recognizing the shadow side as well, so to speak. And then parapsychology, another one, right? These anomalies where we are able to really push and discover the potential and actualize that. So I bring these up also because oftentimes I would imagine an intensified integral consciousness is not necessarily welcome in a society that is, excuse me, I'm getting a low battery sign, that is, what Gebser might call deficient material rational perspective. And so these non-ordinary states have a track record of not fitting in. But Bejan really talks about the necessity of how freedom is such a critical part of that free flow of energy. And so being able to listen to our dreams and our intuition and nature, where we are moved to go, understanding what our desires are and the unconscious forces that structure them, is really important. And so Brian Swimme sort of talks about the desire as the existence of an absence, which itself implies a presence that our life moves to fulfill, so that we can deepen into that desire and natural impulse over time. So that's a lot. To sort of summarize here, I wanted to speak a little bit about what it means to intensify the experience and consciousness of the timeless through an integral cultural philosophy. First felt it important to do a remembrance of the origins of this current we call integral, understanding the unconscious structures historically, psychologically, and cosmologically, as well as the epochal moments underlying why we think and respond in particular ways. wanted to talk about cultural philosophy as a way to deepen and intensify the awareness of the timeless in time, and the aperspectival as an effect of this integral structure that is emerging, and integral ecology as perhaps engaged in the reflective labor, especially when applied to looking at dreams. As
5 minutes, Matt.
Thank you. As a way to coordinate socially and ecologically in terms of problem solving some of the more complex problems that we face today. Third, along with anamnesis and cultural philosophy, wanted to point to cosmogenesis as really the time dimension of energy flow and energy flux, and how flow structures pattern themselves naturally in order to flow towards greater self-organization, which suggests, why we might see wisdom in nature, and how that wisdom of nature heals us, heals society, heals us personally, and heals the land as well, and how a science of spiritual experience can really look at our dreams, at our language, at our daily life, at our ecosystems, and see the organizing principles that permeate them all. And then again, this convergence where Teilhard is seeing this movement towards the omega point as naturally leading to an increase of complexity consciousness, which I think Aurobindo sees in this Gnostic society, in the Gnostic human, who is engaged in that self-conscious transformation. And then finally, directions to intensify this, looking at anomalies, looking at places of convergence, looking at these root metaphors and how language reproduces paradigms, and also the dream as offering new language, as offering new structures, as offering new logics, to potentially find pathways out of those paradigms and into new ones. And so finally, I just want to pose this question, why this necessary distance for integral structure to emerge? And I'd encourage us to sort of find out in daily life where we're drawn to gravitate towards these answers, and gravitate faster to those answers if we're doing that together. So I think that will be it from me. But I appreciate you letting me share a little bit here regarding some of the issues that I've found kind of most resonant in Gebser, Jung, Aurobindo, Teilhard, and some of the others who have inherited that legacy. So thank you.